Behind every bit of mom wisdom is a story of a real mom and real kids just trying to love each other well. Whether you're cozied up on the couch with a mug of coffee or out for a walk, you're welcome to join us as we share stories and laugh, learn, and grow together. It's the iMom Podcast. Welcome to this week's episode of the iMom Podcast. In this group, we have girls, boys, infants, toddlers, tweens, and full-grown adults. We have biological kids, adopted kids. So today we're going to talk about the differences our kids can make in parenting and how it can make them more challenging and how we can use our strengths to be the best moms that we can be to all of our kids. Now, if you have multiple kids, you probably said, my kids are so different from one another.
Everybody says that.
Yes. How are they even related? And we live in a culture where we celebrate differences, but when our kids are different from each other, it makes a mom's job really tricky. So how have you guys experienced this as moms?
I think, Megan, you go, because you got two boys back to back who are young. Do you see it yet?
Oh, totally. I don't feel like they're similar at all. They don't look similar. One has green eyes, one has blue eyes, one has dark hair, one has blonde hair. One is an absolute tank. I mean, it's just, they're different in every way. Hard to tell though, because my younger one's still only 1.5. So his personality hasn't fully developed yet.
Yeah. What about you, Susan? I know that, this is kind of a big picture question, but do you think that having kids that were different from one another was a challenge that you appreciated, or did you see it at the time of like, okay, well now this was working and now I have to change what I was doing?
So I thought I had it all under control. My three biologicals are very, very different. Megan, you'd probably agree.
Yes.
They're totally different. But I thought, oh, I've got this. I can play this game. I threw it into overdrive when I adopted two kids the same age. Then it was like, I didn't have it.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that in a little bit, but especially because your two adopted children are close in age to two of your biological. So you had an A-B comparison, almost like two 9-year-olds to compare, so it's not even like they're different stages.
We should have been a reality show. People would have watched, I promise you, because you had Megan's cringing because I had two girls the same age, one from, a totally impoverished first 12 years of our life, and one, that grew up in our home in
every
America.
Counselor and therapist says, don't not adopt the same age as your current children.
Yeah.
Throw caution.
And you said, I'll do that twice.
Let's do that.
Well, and they actually say, don't disrupt the birth order.
Right. We really blew it up.
Wow. So I thought of some ways that a lot of siblings are different. And so I wanted to run these by you, and you tell me what challenges you think that these opposites would present to a mom. So having one child who's introverted and one child who's extroverted. Like, what have you seen among maybe your own family or your friends' kids?
Definitely had that. My biological son is very introverted versus Megan, who is very extroverted, and even Emily. So I had these two girls, super extroverted, and then this silent kid. And literally we would lose him in the house. We'd be doing something. We go, where did Marky go? He would put himself to bed.
Oh, wow.
He just would
We
check
actually
out.
did lose him one time.
We did. In the house.
He fell asleep under a pile of laundry in her closet.
We were playing hide and seek, and I was panicking. Like, did he leave the house?
We thought he walked out.
How old was he?
6.
Little.
He was 6.
Little.
Oh my gosh.
I've experienced that with my little one. He is completely fine to be in a room by himself, wrapped in a blanket, or he'll be in a corner somewhere. And it really is a challenge for me to give him the attention that he needs, because I have to stop being productive or doing what I need to get done to be with him.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one is always like, let's go do something, or what can I help you with? Can I cook with you? And it's like, to meet an introverted child where they are, it takes a lot more from a mom it's not easy for you to slow down, you know? Okay. So what about an emotional child and a non-emotional child?
Check.
Well, it's funny. Yesterday I was like, okay, so what's the opposite of emotional? It's like, somebody tell me Emily versus Megan. Like,
Exactly.
what is it? Because I was like, Megan's not cold, but you said before that
She
you
is
don't
compared
cry.
to Emily.
Right. So I don't know what you would call a non-emotional child, but
Which is so funny because I don't think my husband or my parents would say that I'm non-emotional, emotional. But I think when you put me next to my sister who emotes to the nth degree, it looks very different.
How do you think that's challenging for a mom, or how was that challenging for you?
I think it's challenging. It was challenging for them and their relationship, because Megan was the older sister. So Emily, of course, wanted the hugs and the attention from her older sister, which I have to say, when you were young, you did do. I mean, you were a girl, so you were all about it. But I think it's hard, even all four of them looking at Emily, who ended up being a musical theater major. I mean, go figure. That's, very dramatic. They would all look at her like, where does she come from? Like, because they're all four, the other four, even the adopted two, are more reserved, let's just say.
Yeah. So then these last two, I'm going to give you that two at a time. Active versus reserved. So like the kid that wants to go and go and go versus the kid who's more calm. And then the stubborn kid versus the easygoing kid, if you're parenting both of those.
I don't feel like my kids have gotten there yet. So I don't know if I can.
I definitely had a very active one. That was Grant, my youngest. And I had to make him run 5 miles before school every day. I mean, that's how active he was.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like what they told me before I got my dog.
Yeah.
So he's going to have to run a mile every 3 times a day.
Well, where he grew up, he was outside all the time and he didn't go to school until he was 10. So to get him to sit through school was difficult.
I imagine that stubborn versus easygoing, both of my kids are really easygoing. So I can't speak to someone who has like a strong-willed child because my kids are not like that. But if you have one child who is very easygoing and then your second one is strong-willed, all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I didn't have to work this hard for the first one. Or the other way around, you might be more stern with the easygoing child when he doesn't need that.
We don't have any easygoing. They're all strong.
My grandmother always says, she goes, man, we are a family of chiefs. Like no one will follow along. Everyone has a very strong opinion.
That's fun. I think that's fun. So do you think these differences are natural or do they come about because of birth order or as a sibling reacting to their older sibling?
I love birth order stuff. Do you ever look at that? Because you like all kinds of personality tests.
Yeah. I talk about this all the time, how Trent and I are both the youngest, and I feel like it affects our relationship.
And Hampton and I are both the oldest.
Wow.
So,
And Mark and I are both middle.
Oh.
Wow.
Right.
Let's do a study.
I'm younger.
But what's Davis?
Davis is the oldest of 3 with an adopted child in there.
Abby.
So, yeah. So, Chloe, with your brothers, do you feel like your personality played off of theirs? Like, do you think that you kind of formed things to respond to what they were doing?
I don't really know. I mean, I know my middle brother, we're 2 years apart. So we had an overlap in friends and everything. I would consider him one of my close friends. I love spending time with him, but we are polar opposites. He's very introverted. He's an architect. He's very creative. I'm, extroverted. I'm all over the place. Now, when we were growing up together, it did cause issues with we rode to school together and I'm like, I don't want to leave right after school. I want to hang out with my friends. He's like, get me out of here. Like, I got to go home, So it wasn't a little bit of an issue, I think, for my parents. But I don't know if I was more easygoing because I wanted to, make it a little bit easier with his personality, or that's just who I am in my family.
I'm really fascinated by this. I think parents often say, oh, well, he's just like me or she's just like her father. Do you think it's easier to parent a child who is like you or who is different from you?
I think like you, because you know what they're thinking, you know what they're feeling, you know how they're going to react to something, you know what might set them off or how to communicate
and
with
what
them.
Motivates them.
What motivates them. And so I think it would, granted, I only have 2 kids and they're not that old, but I feel like with us, we are so similar that we kind of understand or can predict what each other is thinking or how they're going to feel without even knowing.
Note for the audio, when Megan says us, she's pointing to Susan, being that she and Susan are very similar. But so what if the way that you're similar is a negative trait of yours? Because that's where I think I hear people saying it, oh, she's just like me. She's really stubborn, or she's just like me. She's really particular. And then they might have a hard time parenting around that characteristic.
I think in our family, there's a child who's like Mark, and when they get in a heated discussion and I watch them, actually there's 2 kids like this, they bow up to him and then he bows up. So I can see where that is hard because you react the same way.
Do you guys feel like for who have older kids, have you seen their personalities change into maybe like if you thought they were like you, they're like the other parent a little more now? Because I feel like growing up, my mom and I were exactly the same. And as I've gotten older, I see more of my dad's personality in me. Yeah. Have you guys seen that at all?
Well, it's nature versus nurture. I mean, some things you're naturally that way. And some things you acquire from your parents, like the way they handle things, you observe them for years and years and years, and you kind of adapt to that.
Yeah. And I think that for me, having boys, as they've gotten older, they have started to be more like their dad just because they're boys becoming more like men.
Yeah.
We did an episode on parenting styles. It was episode 72. And there's just so many different parenting styles. But what happens when you realize that the style that you gravitate to, whether it's helicopter or gentle or authoritative or authoritarian, when the style you gravitate toward doesn't work with one of your kids, like what do you do then? For example, I have a friend with one very compliant child and another with a very strong-willed child. And she might be able to get away with a more laid-back parenting style with the compliant one, but the strong-willed one would bulldoze her. Yeah. So we all have the preferred way that we want to parent, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to work with your child.
Yeah. I don't love the labels because I think you can't be one way all the time. Right. And so it's really more about how am I engaging with this child than what's my style? Mm-hmm. Because you don't get to choose your children. Mm-hmm. Even whether you adopt or you physically give birth, you really don't get to choose their personality.
How do you explain to your children if one of them is noticing, well, my sibling gets treated a different way without isolating your kids?
So I think the rules have to be the same. And this is hard because if you have a child who struggles with something and your heart goes out to them because, like they're impulsive. Yeah. Okay. Like your firstborn is rarely impulsive, but your second or third may be impulsive and you feel bad because you see they're trying, but they can't. You still have to, you want to give them more grace. You can't have two different sets of rules. Mm-hmm. Like, just because you have more self-control, I expect it of you and I don't of you. So when it comes down to it, the expectation and the consequences have to be similar. Maybe how you approach them is differently. Mm-hmm. Like the really impulsive one, you have to encourage more. You have to say, I really saw that you were trying. Yeah. This is just a slip. Don't worry about it. Take your consequence. You're going to get it. Yeah. It's going to take a little while.
Mm. Susan, let's talk a little bit about, you have several different children and between gender and adoption stories and things like that and emotions. When have you had to change your approach with a child? Like what worked for one didn't work for another? And like maybe specifically with the children you adopted?
Yeah, Mark and I thought we could parent until we adopted. So I will say this. You got to be called to adoption. And for us in particular, it was adopting older children who didn't have many opportunities left to be adopted. And so we ended up, it's a long story. We're going to do it in another podcast, but how we ended up with these two that were the exact same ages as two I already had. And, but they were brought up in a different world. So they came into our home with a whole different life experience and one that really was harmful. Mm-hmm. It was not a good experience. It was really a tough one. So there was a lot of different parenting we had to do that we had never done before. Does that answer your question? It's so totally different. We'll go into it in the podcast, maybe another one, but
yeah, I guess my question is kind of to Chloe's point, Megan maybe was like, well, this is how you raised me. This is what a rule that's always been here for me. And then she sees you have to shift gears for your other kids. I mean, how do you know if you are bending a rule, if you're changing a rule? Like, how do you know when it's fine to do that when the way that you've raised your other kids has...
Well, so I'm the oldest. So rules were bent and changed significantly from me to my youngest sibling because there was 5 of us. So I kind of just got over that of like rules are going to change, especially based on the child. And they just got more relaxed as the kids went down, which is pretty normal for a birth order.
I would actually say, though, we almost had to have more rules with the adopted kids because there was more trouble that they just thought of things to do that my biological kids would have never thought to do. Yeah. And so it was difficult because normally you have lots of rules for littles like Chloe and Megan have. You watch them all the time. They can't go in certain rooms. They can't go indoors. And then as they get older, you learn to trust them. And the rules actually, some of them go away. Like, I trust them with scissors and stuff like that. It's almost reversed. It was almost reversed for us with our adopted kids because they never had rules at all. So you almost had to go back to that baby stage where it was like, you can't do anything without asking because they would just do crazy things.
Mm-hmm.
For a couple who's considering fostering or adopting, what would you say to them about like any reservations they might feel about adjusting their parenting to fit the needs of the child? Because there's so many unknowns. You don't know what that child might be struggling with.
Yeah, I would definitely do it. Let me just say that. There is never 1 second where Mark and I say, I wish we hadn't done it. Was it hard? Yes, it was hard. So, think about what you can handle, how much time you have. And birth order is important. I don't know that I would recommend to do it the way we did it. It does make it more complicated. It was, I think our kids, Megan, you can say, learned a lot about their life and other people's life. And, just that their reality has been a lot sweeter than other kids' reality. So let me see if I answered your question. I would say definitely do it. And I would say you will have to change your parenting because there's probably a lot of psychological damage that you have to undo.
Yeah.
Like, we were wrapping a 9-year-old boy in a blanket and feeding him chocolate milk to bond.
Wow.
So there are some psychological things you have to, if you have any attachment things that you have to go back and do, but it's doable. And my 2 kids are great. I mean,
well, and I think too, psychologically for us is we got to see a totally different way of how people lived.
Yeah.
And then B, we realized, I think, how much we did have and kind of how spoiled we were. And then C, I think it gave us a lot of a different perspective in relating to different people, in that you really understand that people have different experiences that you may not see. And so you have to take that into account when interacting with people in general, because you don't know everyone's background and experience and what that looked like. And so kind of giving people grace based on their behavior of how they were raised.
yeah, I think, we all can do this, be somewhere or go somewhere, school, work, whatever, and somebody acts like something, they're so weird.
Yeah.
Why do they do that? But when you have 2 people in your home and you take them into your family and you see that the reason they do different things is because this is the way they grew up, or this was what was modeled for them, and you give them more grace because it may be from a point of pain that they do that.
Or you just realize, oh, wow, everyone's raised really differently. And I'm sure there's some weird stuff I do.
Yeah.
Exactly. I
Exactly.
was raised. Like, it
That's
seems
good.
normal to me, but it's probably not normal to everyone.
Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit, I'm sure this happened between you and Mark with the kids. When you notice that you have to adjust your parenting style, but you're not sure your husband has picked it up yet, how do you gracefully have that conversation? And this is not just about adopted kids. This is about all of us with our biological kids as well.
So we definitely had kids we covered. So this one's yours. You do better with this one. This one is yours.
But sometimes as an onlooker, if you're outside of the situation, you might realize, okay, well, this child is not responding to that anymore.
Oh no, we had conversations about it all the time.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm not getting through to this child. They're really pushing back on me. I need you to take over. This one's yours. If there's any problems that come, we did that. We tag teamed a lot. In the moment, we had codes. I think I've mentioned this in a different podcast. If Mark or I started escalating with a child, we were to say, gosh, I'm going to get a glass of water. I think you need one. Would you like a glass of water? And that was our cue that, okay, we need to take a break from this, or you need to take it down.
Yeah. I have to remind myself to wait until the kids aren't in the room.
Yeah.
And then say, okay, I've noticed that you treat this one this way and you treat this one this way. And it seems unfair. I think we have to be very careful with the words that we use. And then when they have the same feedback for us, we have to receive it.
Yeah.
I also think too, I've noticed that our oldest responds better with certain topics to my husband better than to me. I don't know why. And I can't point to things specifically, but there will be times where I just know I'm like, you should talk to him about this because he will want to hear your opinion on it versus mine.
That's wise to recognize that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I think I've just noticed with certain things like, I don't know, sports or things like that he doesn't care about my opinion. Yeah. His 5-year-old crush.
So parenting is sanctifying. It refines us. And as we're raising and forming our children, they are also shaping us. So how do you guys think that affects the way you feel about the challenges of parenting different children?
I think I should think about it more often because it changes the perspective from, your you're impacting them to, okay, God, you're teaching me through my child's disobedience. You're teaching me through my child's disobedience.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I always think that our kids are little mirrors being held up to us. And like, if this is going to stretch me or grow me or anything like that, it doesn't feel like it in the moment. It's hard to think that in the moment. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, how did this child help me become a better version of myself?
Yeah.
That's good.
And patience. Your patience just keeps getting, it keeps expanding.
Yeah. I mean, I only have one kid, but I was actually thinking about this morning because I just got back from a trip and it was like our first time taking James to a place that Trent and I love, and we were hiking, and, you know, I just had a moment of like, oh my gosh, like I've dreamed of this so much. And like, I was thinking about this morning of like, I felt like I got a word picture from God of like, I feel like I was sitting in this car before I had James. And once I had James, I learned how to drive. Like motherhood has given me so much purpose and identity of like, I love who I am now because I have to be flexible. I have to be patient. I have to be selfless in ways that I just didn't have to before I had him. And, you know, I can only imagine it expands as I have another child one day.
We would love to hear how you've adjusted your parenting to fit the needs of your children. You can email us at the link in the show notes or message us on Instagram. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the iMom podcast. iMom is the motherhood program of the nonprofit organization Family First. Along with our fatherhood program, All Pro Dad, we exist to help you love your family well. Subscribe to our daily email, the iMom Minute, by going to imom.com/subscribe and get tons of great ideas, insight, and inspiration. The iMom podcast is hosted by me, Abby Watts, along with Susan Merrill, Megan Tigner, and Chloe Blumenthal. As we wrap up today, I want to share something that's important to us here at iMom. We believe that every child deserves to know the love of a mom and a dad. We hope you believe the same thing and might even be willing to take an extra step to change a child's life. Around the country, but especially in the state of Florida where iMom is based, there's a pressing need for medical foster care parents. These foster parents provide crucial support to children with complex medical needs. To be a medical foster care parent, you don't need a medical background. We've partnered with local community-based care agencies and the Florida Department of Children and Families who provide comprehensive training. If you can offer the vital medical assistance these children need, along with compassionate care in a family environment, you're prepared to be a true medical foster care champion. Learn more by visiting mfcfloridahealth.gov. That's mfc.floridahealth.gov.